Hey, this is Buckley with CollabTalk, and I'm here with Liam, and we're in Washington, D.C. at the SharePoint Fest DC event. And Liam was the author of the final deliverable of the new paper that's out. It's a CollabTalk and Marriott School at BYU research project that was commissioned by AvePoint, Microsoft, Rencor, Soliance, and we had the in-kind sponsorships from Tygraph, Collab 365, and SharePoint Fest. So with all of that, so I guess looking at cybersecurity around Office 365, I mean, a lot of people just say, hey, well, it's Office 365 and Microsoft has this, like, what do I actually need to think about? Sure. So I mean, kind of looking at the research, kind of what are your thoughts just broadly looking at people's responses to the survey?
So the main things really that we kind of found is there's lots of discrepancies around what features you get in Office 365 and what licenses you may have. So that was a big one that came up, the idea of, do I need an E5, do I need an E3, do I need to buy something else, and what can I utilize? Secondly, another one for me was really around education. Microsoft seemed to do a great job at giving some information out, but not necessarily covering everything.
Well, that's what the community is like built on, was when there were gaps in the documentation around that. But but that continues to be an issue.
No, that's right. And even though the documentation, I must admit, Microsoft have done a great job. Like on docs.microsoft.com, they have some great stuff, but it doesn't cover all the scenarios that you would expect, and it doesn't necessarily lead you through step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, only for testing. And then, of course, outside of that for 365 was the general concern that people didn't really understand what Microsoft were actually doing to be secure. And that's really, that comes down to me to a lack of understanding of Microsoft's cyber security strategy, the security teams that they have, the red teams, the blue teams, and there wasn't that comfort factor. Like, nobody felt like they were getting a warm fuzzy hug from the Microsoft security because they didn't necessarily understand what was there.
Right. I did an interview this week with Todd Clint, and we came up with the hashtag of consensual hugs.
Nice. I like that one, consensual hugs. That does sound a bit strange, but that's okay.
No, it's a good thing, people. Yeah. No, so I mean, something that is different about this, because that we're obviously we're sharing the research, the output of the study, but is to actually go beyond just sharing data from a survey. It's actually going in with those recommendations and clarifying like what's available and recommendations like this is how you use this information. What this tells us, what you need to go and do.
Yeah. So one of the things that we focused on heavily in the book is that we went through in the ebook was really around these are the real threats versus what people thought were the perceived threats. And so that was an issue that we found, that people often thought this was a risk, this was a risk, this was a risk, and actually none of those were risks in the first place.
That actually came up in another study that we did around in the public sector, and I always use that real or perceived risk, that phrase, because look, there are some legitimate things, and there are, because there are standards, there are things that are out there which can differ, certainly in the public sector, state by state, for example, and you have to look at how you're using the technology, the rules, the guidance, the standards of an organization or of if it's a government agency, but any organization, look at those differences. However, what I've seen, and I know you deal with this a lot more, but what I've seen is that when you have a list of things that are the reasons why an organization can't move to Office 365, and number one on the list is always security and compliance and that side of things. When you start digging into what are your specific requirements, it needs to be able to do this, and you have those conversations where like Microsoft has that certification. Let's look at they have that, they meet that.
Yeah, they do, and that's an interesting. I had a chat with a client earlier on today, and they need to be NIST compliant. And so the first question is, well, what do I do with Office 365? And funny enough, the answer was, well, they already are, and the compliance manager will let you do that too. And so it's that, like, why did they not know that? I know it sounds funny, but that's because it's not advertised enough, people don't know about it.
Or it's just an education. You can't go out and do a marketing strategy around every different facet of what the technology does.
Of course, but obviously, with some of the newer tools that come out, they tend to put it out in preview. Nobody intends to sign up unless you know about the preview. And so that kind of tends to be one of those things. And we tend to find that a lot. But of course, on top of that, it really comes down to you as the business, the organization, whatever it would be, the IT group, security group, needs to be informed and needs to be up to date on what's going on. And we found that from the responses and then from the recommendations that I gave back, it was really around that. There's things that you need to do now. Like, don't just expect everything. So I left some recommendations around GDPR, for example, that Microsoft will be GDPR compliant. But don't assume that means you are.
That means Microsoft is going to be compliant with that. How you use the data after the Microsoft system, like you have to as a company make sure that you're GDPR compliant. You don't have to have that additional pain of wondering what Microsoft is doing and whether they're adding to the problem.
No, that's right. And especially when you look at the GDPR with controllers and processes and things like that, they just did their part. You still have to fix yours, and when you read the guidelines and look at it, it very clearly states that you have to do your piece first, that you can no longer kind of slopey shoulder it out. It's you have to do yours. And so recommendations that we presented back in that will be part of that too, to say, hey, you need to do this is what you should do, based on the findings that we found from the people that we interviewed.
So this is, you'll be able to find out a lot more about what we're talking about. So the study's going to be available. We actually, both Liam and I are participating. I'm moderating. You're one of the guests on it. There is a panel event that's happening. Rencor is actually hosting the webinar. So it's going to be Liam, myself. We have Waldeck and who else? We have Chris Gibbons. We have, and Dux Raymond Sy from AvePoint. And so you definitely want to take a look at that. It's hosted by Rencor, but sponsored by Salience, AvePoint, Rencor, CollabTalk, and Liam will be there.
I will be there. I'm not sponsoring, but I will be there just as a token guest.
But that's where, and as the author of the white paper, the ebook that's coming out, it'll be made available as of April 11th. So that webinar is happening. If you go to the rencor.com, go look at their website at their webinars, you'll be able to sign up to register for that event. And all of those that are registered, of course, will get the first access to the ebook. And then we'll be promoting it. We'll be out on the road doing a multi-city tour, pushing the ebook. Or something like
Of course, everywhere. We're going to go everywhere.
That's right. It's going to be huge. We're going to be opening up, so we're going to have like big bands. We're going to, we'll be.
If we drag it out long enough till Christmas, I can cut one of the things to turn the lights on for Christmas.
That's right. That's awesome. I've already turned down us ringing the bell at NASDAQ, so I'm just I'm just like we don't have time. We don't have time. So yeah. Or I guess not NASDAQ, but the other one, New York Stock Exchange. Whatever.
One of those.
Anyway, well, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yes. Yeah.